The call. I want to move on. Alex in Texas, you're on the Animal Farm. What's up?
Yeah, guys, can you hear me clear?
Yes, sir. You're on the air.
Great. I'm just driving along through some hills. Yeah, I mean, this fella, everything he's saying is true to a point. I'm all for decentralizing things. The oil companies do want to keep us on the commodities they're bringing to market. But when you then connect it to peak oil, it's actually the oil companies that came up with the peak oil scam, like De Beers and Diamonds for artificial scarcity. There are giant oil fields all over the world. There is easily extractable oil all over the world. It's just governments control those areas, like 90+% of Alaska or Utah, and they won't let that oil out. So, yeah, then they do go after oil shale and things here in Texas. But in Texas, from Dallas to Houston, they just found one of the biggest gas fields in the world, oil at every level. I mean, just ultra massive, coming out at pressures like Saudi Arabia, 12-inch pipes out of each well. And so my whole point is, you're right, the oil companies demonize, corn prices going up, and then blame it on biofuels when our waste could literally supply us. I'm all for decentralizing, I agree with him on that. It's just that the fact is 75% of the gas increase we've seen the last 4 years has been dollar devaluation, period, and then people dumping dollars globally into commodities, running for the door into some real asset, has driven up the other 25%. And that's just a fact, and no one will say that in U.S. media. It's all over Reuters, all over Bloomberg, all over OPEC press releases. They're begging the U.S. to stop plunging the dollar. Saying that it's peak oil, that is a eugenicist, and I don't believe this guy knows its roots, that pushed by the Club of Rome. They want to shut the power off and not let us have biofuels either, so they want to artificially make oil shortage. They want to use fake carbon footprint baloney to micromanage and shut down biofuels and local communities, and if we don't get sophisticated and figure out the full battle plan of the New World Order, folks, it's over. I mean, I've got all the documents where the oil companies shut down most of the refineries from 95 to 2000. Associated Press reported on that. I mean, they're certainly running a scam, but the nature of the scam is not known by the public.
Hold on 1 second, David. We actually got a break coming up. Alex, stay on the line. We'll hold you over. It's a good point. I wanted to bring up the peak oil thing as well, and I'm sure it was going to bring up some interesting points. So stay tuned, folks. AnimalFarmShow.com. When we get back, we'll have Alex and we'll have David's response to the peak oil crisis and the New World Order. Stay tuned. Back talking with David Blume, 512-646-1984, folks. Love when you participate. Alex in Texas called in and asked David Blume a lot of things, first of all, but it was a lot about peak oil. I think this is Alex Jones, so I want to give a little bit of a round of applause for Alex Jones. Pyth, if you would.
Of course. Yes, we are big fans of Alex Jones here at Animal Farm.
Alex, you're on hold. So I want to let David respond because we ran into a break. So, David, respond to Alex's comments, and then I'll bring Alex back up, and then we'll have a little discussion.
Well, basically it goes like this. We've been predicting peak oil for a long time, since the 1950s, actually. When it was first predicted by, Hubbard King, he basically said that we're going to peak in the United States in 1970, and the oil companies all said, oh, no, that'll never happen. We got a couple hundred years worth of oil. And, of course, in 1970, we peaked in the United States. He also said that roughly after 2000, we were going to peak on a worldwide basis. And I wrote about the same thing back in the 1980s because I had access to all the same information. And as an engineering ecologist, I was able to read the writing on the wall. And I also looked at the reports that General Motors were putting out, which had obviously a vested interest in making sure they had cars that ran on fuel that was going to be around. And they said peak oil was going to come around 2000. So, it's basically here. And it's tempting to say, oh, the oil companies are just controlling production, so we have to pay more money. But, the thing that I totally agree with Alex about is they've closed a bunch of refineries. The reason why they've closed them is there's no oil to put through them. The reason why they haven't built any new refineries is that if they did, there'd be no extra oil to put in it anyway.
Let me let Alex respond. Alex, you on the line there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I have the oil documents from 1995 and 96 where they said there was too much oil. These are internal secret documents that were gotten by lawsuits. The Associated Press reported on the article. They said that there was too much oil, a glut of oil, and they had to shut down smaller oil companies shipping fuel in for refining, and they bought up over 220 of them and shut them down. And then going back to saying we're at peak oil and just stating it, and global warming's real. We better have a carbon footprint tax on everybody. Have the Club of Rome documents that is about control and socialism. And just to finish up here, there are giant discovered oil fields all over the Gulf of Mexico, all over Alaska, and to then just state we've hit peak oil when they have found giant oil reserves all over the stands, all over India, all over Russia. I mean, I'm sorry. I have a lot of family that works at refineries and all the way down to Roughnecks. You name it. I know the whole oil industry. There is actually two different types of oil. There is and of course coal and other things. There is the fossil fuel, but then there's also a lot of evidence. They're now finding oil and gas at 20,000 feet, 16,000 feet, with really no connection to any type of alluvial deposits in the sands or any of this. Say when Texas was under a inland sea. So that's the basic facts, and we have the facts, but it doesn't matter. We're the gullible people who will believe the delusions. The dollar is plunging. That's why you're paying more for fuel, period. And you watch, you'll pay for everything else more. It's the dollar, period. PrisonPlanet.com. You guys have a good one.
Alex, thanks so much for the call. Ben, you want to respond? I know this is a touchy subject.
I just wanted to say something in regards, whether, in my opinion, whether peak oil exists or not, or whether it's a false thing created by the oil companies. We do want to remember that the oil is basically, and we all know this, sort of an inefficient type of energy, and the ultimate solution for I think both sides of the argument is to get us off oil into some type of alternate energy source. So,
right, absolutely. So, just a quick couple of comments, and we can move on to other callers or other subjects. But basically, if you get below 15,000 feet, oil doesn't exist. It turns into natural gas. The documents that talk about the so-called abiotic oil, non-fossil fuel oil, were produced in Russia back under Stalin, which basically were created because if you were a petrogeologist under Stalin and you said oil was going to run out, you just were killed. So they created this whole thing of abiotic oil, in other words, without biology oil. It was a whole fabricated set of things that the scientists in Russia did to stay alive, but everybody in the scientific world, laughs at that. It's just not true. But, it doesn't matter, because whether the oil companies are controlling the price or whether peak oil is controlling the price, we can't afford the price. And so no matter why the price of oil is expensive, you and I need to get off of it, and we need to get off of letting those people control our lives and control our economies, because they're doing a pretty bad job of it. We can do a much better job ourselves by doing alcohol.
And I'm absolutely adamantly opposed to that.
Thank you, George. That was George Bush. He's on the line too there, David. And the other thing that Alex was saying, it's just about the government control. The other thing that Alex brought up that I feel very strongly about, and I have, just to let you know, David, I have enormous respect for your knowledge about this, and I would probably agree more with Alex on the peak oil thing. But either way, maybe with a more neutral ground at this point, is just this idea of how government is manipulating this go green movement. Charles Ratner, we correspond often, him and I often have a little discussion about it, and I'm all for using fuels that are a lot safer, a lot cleaner. I think we should be more responsible as people, but the bottom line is that the government is manipulating this whole green movement, and it's making me sick. And it's all
here's how they're doing it.
It's all about getting your money. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the way they're manipulating the green movement right now is they've got the entire green spectrum arrayed against alcohol. They basically, saw, this was a couple of years ago, they saw that climate change folks, green folks, progressive folks, labor, were all starting to pull behind alcohol, and the oil companies had to put an end to that. So we've seen $1 billion worth of propaganda over the last year trying to paint alcohol as competing with food interests, for crops in this world, and making a moral argument that we shouldn't go to biofuels. So now you've got green groups across the country, being sucked in by this propaganda and, marshaling against having us go to biofuels. as if they don't understand what we're going to get instead is a horrendous brew of horrible synthetics. Now, the reality of food versus fuel is like this. If basically alcohol plants, and this is not true, but I'm just going to throw it out there, if alcohol plants were competing with food interests for corn, the idea is supply and demand. There's only so much corn. If more than one customer is trying to buy it, then the price gets bid up. So the idea is there has to be a shortage of corn for the price to go of alcohol and corn to go up. And in reality, last year's harvest was not a shortage at all. We had the biggest harvest in 33 years. We had 1.6 billion surplus bushels of corn in addition to everything the alcohol plants and the food companies needed. So with no shortage, there could be no reason, no economic reason why the price of corn should go up. But as Alex, indicated, there's a bunch of people dumping money into the commodities market and driving up the price of corn. And guess what? The people that are doing that are OPEC and the oil companies.